Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's me. I am sitting here in my office in lovely downtown Chicago, and thank you all for being flexible with class last night. With regard to our kind of doing everything online this week. And to those who are not feeling well, I wish you the best, and I hope you're feeling better for the weekend. Proof that I always have a cup of coffee in my hand. Thank you very much. So I wanted to go over some of the things that you'll want to focus on for this week, leading into week 4 next week. We are now halfway done, which seems impossible. And touch on some of the assignments that how you'll want to approach them for this week and whatnot. So your personal introduction presentations are graded. Your presentation analysis grades are done, but I need to put them in the grade book, and my apologies for that. I thought I had done that, and that was an oversight on my part, but they are complete, so I'll post those today. The grade book should be updated, I think, with everything we've done so far. So with regard to this week, obviously the big one next week is our first speech where you're getting up and actually giving your speech, and it is the informative one. So for this week, I would like you to actually review the textbook on your own, and there are a couple of specific reasons, specific takeaways here. First off, Chapter 6 and 8 deal specifically with research and organization. And I know we've talked about those things already, but we'll continue to talk about them until the end of the course because they're probably the two most important aspects of what we're doing in terms of kind of preparing you for life outside of this class, such as it is. So the main takeaways with regard to Chapter 6 and Chapter 8 would be the organizational patterns they talk about for the informative speech, for organizing an informative speech. You've got chronological, topical, cause and effect. We went over a few of those last week and talked about those in some depth. They have a really nice example in the textbook that indicates kind of an example of spatial patterns. We talked about that and how kind of difficult those were to explain. But they provide a nice example in that they show a diagram of the solar system to kind of explain, if you were explaining that to someone, distance between planets, that sort of thing. That's a case where spatial patterning would make a lot of sense if you were talking about the planets, let's say, and talking about how far out from the sun everything was. So spatial patterns kind of deal with that. But there's a nice series of diagrams and breakdowns of the pattern structure that essentially all speeches or essays would follow. And then in Chapter 8, on page 166, Table 8.2, there's something called Monroe's Motivated Sequence. And that's something that I think is probably the most important thing in terms of audience that you could take away with regard to preparing for your first speech. And it kind of walks you through the stages of engaging your audience and keeping them interested and kind of taking them into consideration as you're preparing a speech. Again, we've talked about the need for kind of recognizing the context of this class, and it's not just about giving speeches to your classmates. It's about preparing to give speeches to who knows who, right? out in the world. So if you kind of think about the Monroe's Motivated Sequence after reading through it and kind of think about how that can be applied to really just about any public speaking situation, I think that's a really nice tool to have. So pay special attention to that. Then the outline, obviously. We talked a little bit about, how outlines can vary in terms of structure, that sort of a thing. I'm not particularly hung up on the structure, and what I mean by that is I don't really care if you use Roman numerals, if you use bullet points, if you use dashes, whatever it is that you use to organize. However, some requirements to keep in mind. The outline should be in complete sentences, so all complete sentences throughout the entire outline. With at least 3 main points, okay? So 3 main points you're going to talk about with regard to your topic. And then 3 supporting details or subpoints for each of those main points. So if I was going to talk about coffee, for example, what am I going to talk about? Okay, well, growing the beans, the roasting process, and how it's distributed. Maybe those are my 3 giant points I'm going to talk about. Well, under each of those points, there are going to be details that explain those points to the audience, right? So my subpoints under, roasting might be, what's the process consist of? How does the process work? How do different roasters approach it? What is there differences? Are there differences in terms of how people can do it? That sort of a thing. So I think you're all at least essentially familiar with the basics there in terms of points and subpoints from what we've talked about. So 3 main points, 3 subpoints, complete sentences all the way through, and then obviously your references need to be cited in the body of the outline. And on the OWL site for APA formatting, they show how to go through in-text citations, and they'll explain that. I will post something over the weekend that kind of walks you through the process of citing something in the body of a paper or an outline that kind of indicates with some examples how that works, so you know what to do there. Your outline draft then will be due this week at some point before class, but sooner than later ideally, because if you'll notice in this week's course page in D2L, there is a discussion called Outlining an Informative Speech. And what I'd like you to do is upload your outline draft when that's complete to that discussion so that your classmates have a chance to comment on it, take a look at it, give you some feedback if necessary. But the reason I say if you could get it in sooner than later, that would be good. It's what we were going to do in class last night, so you kind of got a free pass on that. But B, as soon as you post that to the discussion forum, I will go in there and I'll download it and I'll mark it up and provide feedback on it. Basically, so you get the advantage of essentially having a marked up rough draft. It's not for a grade. The draft doesn't count for a grade, but that way you can get feedback before turning in the final version. Because the final version of the outline is due in class on next Thursday when we come to class. So we're not going to have class time to work on it next week. The final draft of your informative outline that accompanies your speech will be due when you come to class next week on week 4. So it's important to have that in and to have that with you. And I had one person ask if you need to have it an essay format. No. The only thing that accompanies the speech is the outline itself and the reference page, obviously, for your sources. So hope that's clear. If not, feel free to shoot me an email. I can clarify whatever you would like. And with that, I leave you to it. I look forward to seeing what everyone decides to discuss. I've read some of your research proposals that you submitted, and they're looking good. I like what I'm seeing. So hopefully everyone is on the right track with this, and I will be checking my email pretty much all the time in the event that you have a question or something like that. And I'll be checking in at least once every day to the discussion forum to see if anyone submitted outlines. So as soon as you do, I can get them back to you with feedback and give you some time to polish it a little bit. And the final element of this that, of course, we haven't discussed yet, but should go without saying, is practice. Practice your speech. It's the best way to get comfortable with the material. It's the best way to get comfortable with your organization. It's the best way to get comfortable with citing sources to the audience. Just practice. Practice to the mirror, practice to your dog, practice to your family. Practice on your phone. As silly as that sounds, a lot of times if I'm going to give a presentation of some kind, I'll record myself, just a voice memo on my phone, to hear the way that I explain certain things or something like that. So if I can go back and listen to that and say, okay, well, I understand what I meant there, but that's not going to be clear to people who don't understand the topic I'm talking about. So it's not a bad idea to record yourself, either audio or video, and kind of give it a once over. Take a look at areas that might need some polishing. Just to make sure you're as practiced as you can possibly be, because practice, honestly, is what's going to keep you from being anxious. It's going to make you look better in any sort of public speaking situation, and it'll be more engaging for the audience. So be sure you're practiced, be sure your outlines are ready. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a wonderful weekend, all of you.